Now from here we cut to Rhaenyra in bed where she's awakened and taken down the stairs. It's shot in a similar way to what happened with the Dragon Keepers last week, with us following her down. There they stood up to her and left without working things out, and it's sort of a similar thing here. Now this is of course a flip on the meeting at the Sept, with Alicent now going out to her instead. Me, I'd have just beheaded her there, mate. However, I think Rhaenyra rightfully knows that Alicent means nothing in the war at this point. Killing her won't stop Aemond, and she's not on the council either. Alicent talks about how she used to believe there was an order, and brings up how Rhaenyra didn't. This ties back to their first scene where the former was ripping out pages from books whilst Alicent studied. As mentioned earlier, she's lost her faith, but says this extends to every person in her life. The baptism at the lake has really changed her, and she says she wants to be free from the Game of Thrones. All the plotting, backstabbing, it's got too much, and being isolated has made her see the truth. She just wants to take her daughter and grandchild and leave. In the end, she wants to be absolved, which Rhaenyra mocks. We catch Alicent biting her nails as well, which is a characteristic she had when she was younger. This highlighted her anxiety, and she was constantly picking away at them. It's such a good character detail, and she then says how Viserys never stopped loving Aemma. This explains why he kept Rhaenyra as the heir, and Alicent says that if Rhaenyra attacks King's Landing, then Alicent will let her in. She's betraying her son in order to avoid more death, but there are ulterior motives. Alicent wants Aegon to be spared, but it's not something Rhaenyra will agree to. We ended season 1 with her learning she'd lost her son, and she feels like Alicent has to give up hers to make things right. Beyond this in the book, Rhaenyra also blamed Alicent for her miscarriage, with the news of Aegon's usurping adding more stress to the labour. He has to be publicly executed, and yeah, unfortunately the sides can't agree. Now it shows a massive change in Rhaenyra, as she hated the fact that baby Jaehaerys was killed. She saw some kinship in Helaena, but won't spare Alicent of the pain that she herself has gone through. It's a sad way to end things, and ultimately Rhaenyra chooses more death and the destruction of thousands of innocents. Yay, the best queen ever. I think ultimately though, Rhaenyra believes that she doesn't have a choice. She sees this as being as a burden now, and no matter how much she may want to stop it, she knows it's too late. If things had stopped at the Sept, there may have been a chance though. She asks Alicent if she'll make the sacrifice, and says a son for a son. It is of course the title of the chapter in the work, and the name of the first episode this season. This notion of a son for a son is of course based off an eye for an eye, and as we've seen, it just leads to the need for more vengeance. It's not really going to make much of a difference though, because Aegon's out the fight. To me, it's kind of petty for Rhae to do this, and it's showing how the crown crushes all who wear it. Great quote by Viserys. It of course also builds off the back of Blood and Cheese, where Helaena had to choose which child had to die. In the work, they didn't really play it like that, and she actually had to pick between her two sons. Blood and Cheese then killed the one she chose to save, but in the end it was still, choose your son. Either way, it's a devastating thing to force a mother to do, but Alicent's ready to give up everything she's fought for in the end. In the end, it reflects the opening of season 1 as Alicent puts forth a son to die. Alicent says she promises to open the keep, and Rhaenyra says that history won't remember her well. She calls her the Cold Queen, and we know from the work that she wasn't well liked. Alicent then offers her the chance to come with her, and yeah, I think the whole thing about being in love and the fan theories, it might have some weight. Ultimately though, she turns her down, and Aegon will of course not be in the kingdom when things kick off, and Alicent may still be seen as a liar. Now we end the episode with war still not being averted, and it now being the only path forward. To a lovely sad piano soundtrack, we see Rhaenyra standing in front of the dragon Meraxes. This skull is something she's looked at a lot throughout the season, and it was a dragon that was killed in combat. This eerily ties in with the death of another character, who we'll talk more about in the spoiler section. I do think her being here though is very important, as it highlights both Dragon and the Targaryens are in danger. Alicent heads out, and Hugh, Adam and Ulf are then adorned in armor. Ulf seems to be the only one happy about it, with it highlighting he's not taking the war seriously. We also catch Rhaenyra running through the Vale. Now Rhaenyra conquering Sheepstealer is a big change up from the book, with her dragon originally being called Morning. This was the small hatchling that accompanied them to the Vale, which we likely saw during the events of episode 6. That leaves 3 dragon eggs remaining from the ones that she originally took from Dragonstone. Either way, Nettles was the one who conquered Sheepstealer in the book, with her being described as foul-mouthed, filthy and fearless. We have been over the character and read passages out from the work describing her, but I know that it does some of your heads in, so I'll not repeat it every single week. The cliff notes are though that she was a bastard of uncertain birth who grew up homeless in Spice Town in Hull. Having to steal in order to survive, her nose was slit after she was caught during one of her risky maneuvers. Hearing of the call for Dragonseeds, she went out to Dragonstone and would take Sheeps to Sheepstealer every day until the pair eventually bonded. In the work, Sheepstealer is described as Sheepstealer, a notably ugly mud-brown dragon hatched when the old king was still young. Had a taste for mutton, swooping down on shepherds' flocks from Driftmark to the Wendwater. He seldom harmed the shepherds, unless they attempted to interfere with him, but had been known to devour the occasional sheepdog. So they've taken elements of her character and put them into Rhaenyra, but it's likely they're going in a drastically different direction overall. I'll save that for the spoiler section again, you know it by now, but it will spoil stuff, so we'll leave it for that. We also see the Hightower forces marching out and can catch Daemon and his dragon flying overhead. Now Daemon has been teased throughout the season with him being off in Old Town. Deemed the most popular of Alicent's children, he's also described in the work as being kind and courteous. I have gone in depth on the character in other breakdowns, so I don't just want to repeat that, but we know he was sent to his uncle at age 10. Growing up in humble surroundings, he saw the strongest being people that were going to take away his birthright. We know that he got his dragon at age 6, with Targaryen being nicknamed the Blue Queen. Described as looking cobalt and copper, this modestly sized dragon was known for its speed and cunning. Now at this point we see the Starks crossing the twins, which was open to them due to Jace's negotiations. These were of course a major thing in the main series, with these being where the Red Wedding went down. Ironically, that had the Starks versus Lannisters, with those two other families now marching against each other. The Lannisters would claim a great victory through using it down the line, and it's sort of like poetry they rhyme. Having this location seized is now of course a major turning point in both wars. This was one of the only crossings at the Green Fork, with armies having to march hundreds of miles in either direction to find another point to cross. Originally set up as a wooden bridge, the phrase ran tolls which netted them a fortune over the centuries. Standing for roughly 500 years at this point in the timeline, it's now been developed into a strong fortitude that makes it almost impenetrable. The Starks being here is also worrying for the Greens, as originally they weren't thought to be much of a problem. The work said, the North was too remote to be much import in the fight, the council judged. By the time the Starks gathered their banners and marched south, the war might well be over. However, beyond that, we can also see the soldiers are all elderly men. If you cast your mind back to episode 1 in the season, you might remember that Cregan promised greybeards. This is a term for an elderly man, so it's a nice bit of attention to detail to have these guys here. From here, we then join the Lannister army, who are now alongside House Lefford. Lefford was who we saw at Golden Tooth, with them now accompanying the army. The Lannister sigil is a golden lion, and you can see these in the cages behind them. The book talks about this entire plan, with it saying, here he proposed to strike the Riverlands from both east and west, and thus force the Lords of the Trident to fight on two fronts at once. Jason Lannister had assembled a formidable host in the Western Hills, 1,000 armoured knights, and 7 times as many archers and men-at-arms. Let him descend from the high ground and cross the Red Fork with fire and sword, while Sir Criston Cole marched forth from King's Landing, accompanied by Prince Aemond himself on Vhagar. The two armies would converge on Harrenhal to crush the traitors of the Trident between them, and if his uncle emerged from behind the castle walls to oppose them, as he surely must, Vhagar would overcome Caraxes, and Prince Aemond would return to the city with Prince Daemon's head. We can see Harrenhal in the Fork, with the Battle of the Red Fork becoming something major down the line. Daemon's army is of course a massive thing, and we're then shown him with his armour going towards all of his people that he now has. Finally, we also have the fleet out at sea, with a triarchy coming together. This will be to capture the Gaya Banner, which is currently carrying 2 Targaryen princes. Children are in peril once more, and yeah, some slow motion, epic montage to let us know what's coming. Corlys and Alan are also there as well, with it highlighting a major upcoming naval battle. Though Alan looks at him like he's doing his duty, but he doesn't want to father, again, I think we will see them coming together. Lastly, we end with Otto in a cage, which is mirrored in Aegon and Larys being escorted away from King's Landing. Otto's fate is a bit ambiguous, and I'd love to hear what you think's going on with him. We don't know from the work exactly what happens with him down the line, but I'm going to save that for the spoiler section. Alicent then looks over the bay, with us getting mirrored shots of her and Rhaenyra. The final shots have the pair both framed in the exact same spot camera-wise, however Alicent's looking over the water and sky. This represents the freedom that she's now got by stepping away from everything. Selfishly, she's doomed to her family, but it's meant she can step away and be alone. On the opposite side of this, Rhaenyra is shot so she's surrounded by scrolls that document her family's history and lineage. They represent a trap which she's now stuck in, with her being in the center at the bottom. The scrolls seem like they sprawl out from her like a family tree, but they also represent the burden she still carries. In staying there and accepting her duty, she's doomed herself to be stuck in this game. It's a really symbolic way to end the entry, and sadly it highlights she'll never escape the Game of Thrones.
He said it! He said it!